Hotep and welcome once again to another edition of Community Cop. My name is Noel, leader, one of the co-founder members of 100 Blacks in Law Enforcement Care. I'm here once again with my co-host, Michael Graves, aka Big Mike.
Namaste, brother.
And we'd like to welcome you, our viewing audience, to another edition of Community Cop. This is where truth and real talk occurs. And as we customary do, we want to go fast forward into our historical piece. That's why we like to open up our program, or that's how we like to open up our program, with historical facts. And today we want to talk about the 1857 Dred Scott decision. Michael.
Right, just want to say about Dred Scott that certainly this is one of the most famous constitutional cases that became somewhat of a constitutional crisis in our history that we always need to remind ourselves of. Certainly, it was Chief Justice Taney that sat over this courtroom, and he decided basically, because of the difference in jurisdiction, it ended up in the Supreme Court as opposed to either a court in New York or a court in Missouri. And so he wanted to end the debate because he was upset that Missouri had sided with Dred Scott in his case of freedom. So he wanted to end this. So he basically ruled that Black people are not citizens. Consequently, they do not have the right to be in court, period. End the story. And so to make it clear, throughout time, throughout the age of time, and that even the dumbest white person will not err on the side, on any other side than his, what is called a dictum. And that's a pronouncement with that's unnecessarily done. He said that a Black person has no rights that a white person is bound to respect. He didn't have to say that because he had already ruled we were not citizens. Consequently, we did not qualify to be in court addressing constitutional issues, certainly around freedom. So he had already made that ruling, but he made a dictum that outlived him, and that has gone on for well over 160 something years or more. That dictum, because that's what people remember. So whether you a sharecropper, whether you dig ditches, whatever you do for a living, whether you are educated or not, you remember what he told, the message he gave to white people, that he does not care what a Black person in life does for a living, what their education might be. They are not bound to respect any Black person on the planet, and that white people are in charge, period, in the story.
And the audacity of that pronouncement, he said, a Black man doesn't have any rights. There's not one right that mentioned that a Black person should have in this country that any white man is bound to respect. You know, and that's preposterous. And that's why individuals such as myself take very high objection when people like to pretend as if America was founded on such righteous and judicious principles. America was founded on white supremacy, racial hatred, and you know, that's just the truth of the matter. But thank you for that.
And just wanted to add, in other words, he's saying that your woman, your wife, is not your wife. Your wife is his property. Consequently, anytime he desires her, she's his. It doesn't matter what you think you have. You don't, because your wife, your children are his property, period.
All right. The second historical piece we wanted to remind our viewing audience is the Harriet Tubman. You know, our ancestor Harriet Tubman, her birth date was not known, but her departure when she returned to the ancestors was 3/10/1913.
Yes, one of our greatest queen mothers that we've ever produced here in North America. Certainly, she was a freedom fighter of the highest order. just the mention of her name, it puts you in rarefied air to even mention her strength. We had women like that in the movie Black Panther, Wakanda, fierce, strong warriors. And believe me, every Black woman potentially can be that. This is why they make you wear all types of makeup, change your hair color, change your hairstyle, turn you against the Black man, teach you that you have no history, just try to convince you to drop your all African cultures and claim that they're somehow primitive, and you don't have a broad scope if you get into an Afrocentric lifestyle, and that obviously a European lifestyle is the way. So they don't want you to be a Harriet Tubman, a warrior for your people, and they discourage that. And that's why they've always taught Black people have no history, and critical race theory will not be allowed to be taught in American schools, because they don't want to teach you, they don't want you to have pride in the race. And that's when all is said and done, we must have pride in our race and culture.
And one of the things that Harriet Tubman was most known for historically was freeing so many enslaved Africans. And this is an individual who had the opportunity to be free herself, because a lot of times she would enter slave states to free her kith and kin, bring them to free states. And while inside a free state, she would take the chance of re-entering a slave state to get more enslaved Africans. Right. So, I mean, her history definitely is one that we should never forget, and her bravery and the love that she had for her people was demonstrated in her not being concerned about her own freedom, but being so pressed and feeling so pressed to re-enter these dangerous slave states to free other enslaved Africans. So, we should always remember Sister Warrior Harriet Tubman. The last historical piece, Michael, we wanted to talk about occurred on 3/7/1965, and is better known as Bloody Sunday, when members of our community was assaulted brutally across the Edmund Pettus Bridge. Want to remind our viewing audience about that date and that incident.
Well, certainly this was a march from Selma to Montgomery. Montgomery is the state capital of Alabama, and so it's like a 54-mile walk. So it's going to take several days to accomplish that. And certainly it was, let's say, around 600 people that took that march on that day. Strangely missing, truth be told, was the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. He was supposed to be there. So the march was led by John Lewis and Hosea Williams. Now, they were warned several times. They were warned by everybody from President Johnson all the way down to the Attorney General's office, as well as the state of Alabama, the governor, and everyone else, not to undertake this march. They decided to forge ahead. And as they proceeded, they were warned several times by the state police, who ultimately attacked them and beat them viciously. And want to thank our producer, Veronica Kitt, for reminding us that even those that ran, because there did come a time in the march where they actually ran backwards, running back the other way, back towards Selma from Montgomery across the bridge, and they were chased and roundly beaten down. They were savagely beat, not only the dogs that was biting, but was biting them, but those nightsticks were used in an extreme manner. And it's an embarrassment to law enforcement in America to watch them actually beating men, women, and children. Your thoughts?
Well, it's an excellent point, as you stated, that producer Veronica Kitt brought up, because Many of the footage that they show just showed the initial contact between the marchers, peaceful and unarmed marchers, and the police. So most of the footage showed the initial interaction between both groups and how vicious the police officers were, and initially pushing them back. But the savagery of the beating, is you never see that, because as you stated, the officers pursued the crowd as they retreated, because I guess a lot of them didn't expect to be dealt with so viciously by officers in uniform, simply for attempting to invoke their right, the freedom to march, freedom of speech, freedom to protest, etc. And they were marching for a worthy cause, of course. I don't think many of them thought for a minute that they would be treated so savagely, so brutally, put it that way. Yeah. So a lot of that footage, even though people have it, and perhaps our producer may, you never get to see the officers pursuing the crowd, and in their pursuit continue to beat them, so brutally as they retreated. And you understand, and when you view the footage, you see that the officers were actually enjoying what they were doing. They didn't have to be pressed to do this, because once the crowd retreated, once they went back on the other side of the bridge, or were heading in the direction of the other side of the bridge, officers didn't stop and hold their ground. They pursued the crowd, and they continued to beat them, brutally.
Well, that's a good point. That if anything, since they were told not to go over the bridge, the officers should have held their ground. But instead of just holding their ground, they took ground and ran forward. And so even though the crowd was running away from them, they chased them and beat them down. Now, what normally people don't mention, that this march was a result of the killing of Jimmy Lee Jackson, who was killed. And these were all people who were trying to get the right to vote. And ultimately, after this march, President Johnson led the charge in signing the Voter Rights Act of 1965. Now, the next march that occurred days later, it was led by Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. However, the truth be told is he was supposed to be at the first one, but some would say that he acquiesced to President Johnson's request. It was really a demand that he not be there, and they knew it was going to get really physical. And I'm not in any way besmirching Dr. King and his courageous legacy, but whatever, that's why I'm saying it's more like along the lines of a deal being cut. It wasn't a lack of courage, because if it's one thing that Dr. King did not lack, is courage itself. I think it more or less was an understanding on agreement he had with President Johnson not to march that day. And so Hosea Williams and John Lewis led that march. And of course, John Lewis was able to capitalize on that for the rest of his life, because he eventually got into electoral politics, ran for Congress, and had the good life after that. But Dr. King should have been there, and I'm not saying it would have been different. I think his head would have got split with everybody else's. That day we should not forget Bloody Sunday.
Right, and one of the reasons why I believe that Johnson didn't want them to, persist in their march, because he understood the nature of these officers. He understood the nature of the governor. He understood the nature of the racists that were in control of the state, and he knew what they were capable of doing.
Yes.
And as president of the United States, it was an embarrassment to the country, to the nation, who professes such virtuous rules as freedom of speech, freedom to march, freedom to protest. This is what they preach all around the world, and even at that time. So this particular incident was an embarrassment. It was a black eye to the American government, who at the time was pointing fingers at communist China, communist Russia.
That's right.
And talking about nations that do not have, their citizens don't have all of these rights. But here you have right, Cuba. Here you have, right here in America, unarmed, innocent, many religious people marching across the bridge just for the right to vote and being treated so brutally. So the president knew that this would be an embarrassment, and it was an embarrassment. And that's why when King did march, you didn't have a repeat of what occurred, because if it would have been repeated, it really would have been two black eyes for the American government and the America's reputation around the world.
Excellent point, brother. Excellent point.
Right. And then I want to fast forward to what we have today. Now, I commend all of those individuals who marched on that particular day, but recently, in the reenactment of what occurred in terms of the march, Vice President Harris, with a large contingent of African Americans and others, marched across the bridge in commemoration of what occurred in 1969. But what I take issue with, I'm sorry, 65, right, 65. What I take issue with is, I think it's preposterous that as American citizens, we're still talking about these same issues in terms of the right to vote. In 2021, which is approximately 57 years from the first march across the bridge, we're still having these issues when you have members in Congress, members in the Senate, members and governors and states throughout the nation attempting to thwart the ability for African Americans to participate in electoral politics. And I think that's preposterous, that we're still having the same fight 57 years, which is a lifetime later. And it's only a reflection of the unwillingness of this country to really live up to what they claim they're about. This is a democracy. This is stated to be one of the leading democracies in the world. But yet in 2021, approximately 57 years after Bloody Sunday, we're still having to fight and argue and march and protest for the right to vote. And I think that's just a small commentary about America and Americanism.
Well, I agree with everything you said, and certainly those were poignant points. I would just add to it by saying that for today's so-called civil rights leaders, I think it's just a photo op. You cannot recreate Bloody Sunday. I'm going to say that again. You cannot recreate Bloody Sunday. You cannot recreate the marches of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Medgar Evers, and so many others, Kwame Ture. You can't recreate that because they put their lives on the line. You cannot recreate what Harriet Tubman did. She put her life on the line a minimum of 19 times and brought out 300 enslaved Africans. There's no such thing as a recreation of that. It cannot be done. When they marched, you didn't know whether they was going to make it or not. When they march now, it's a festive, glorious photo op. That's all it is. They are paid to go and paid to come. They are paid to do this, and it's window dressing. It's to show that America has changed, and as you pointed out so eloquently, fundamentally, it hasn't changed because people can't vote. People don't have access to jobs. People don't enjoy the rights in a courtroom that white people have. Consequently, it's the same issues. So you can't recreate the danger involved, the terrorism that lurked, because they are just behaving differently now. They would never have an army of police officers beating women and children outright. They're not gonna do that anymore. Now, they will kill you when you're in an alley like Freddie Gray. They'll do that if you on an isolated street like Michael Brown. They're not going to outright have an entire contingency of police officers beating down women, children, church-going people. They're not going to do that. They might tell you later, like a Bull Connor or somebody else, we catch you later, we got something for you, but not in front of cameras, CNN, MSNBC, and Fox, and all these cameras around. They're not going to do that anymore.
Okay, excellent point. On the side note, I would just like to say, these are my opinions, not community cop, not 100 Blacks. This is Noel leader. I think we spend too much energy, too much of our talent, too much time, too much finances in electoral politics in this country as it is. I think the Democratic Party has failed us. The Republican Party has failed us. I think we would do better if we began to organize our community, as Kwame Ture always said, our community is poorly organized. If we spend more energy organizing our community, and if we're going to engage in political, in this political process, I think it's so important for us to first establish an independent Black political party, because Black Democrats' commitment to the party is above their commitment to our community. You know, Black Republicans' commitment to the Republican Party is higher than their commitment to the Black community. So I think all the energy, all the time, all the finances, all the expertise that we put towards America electoral politics, if we look what we get out of it, I think we fall short. Even as I stated earlier, in 2021, still having to demand, a more equitable and fair electoral process shows that, 57 years, we put all this energy into something that we still don't have. I think we would do much better if we began to practice some of the things that Marcus Garvey preached and taught. If we put more energy, more finances, more expertise, more organizing into organizing our community, as Marcus taught, or if the most honorable Elijah Muhammad taught, I think we would fare far better, and I think we would reap more benefits, way more benefits from our efforts if we did that, as opposed to continue to invest so much time and energy into a political process that shows us short time and time again. That's my personal opinion.
I concur.
Okay, some old business we want to talk about. Some may not have read or heard that the Supreme Court Justice David N. Welch wrote an opinion, and the Supreme Court decided that Bill Cosby won't review the decision that Bill Cosby was released on. Of course, the district attorney in the county wanted to appeal Bill Cosby being let out of jail, but the Supreme Court agreed that the decision that was made with his original prosecutor at the time, that if Bill Cosby came forward and spoke at a deposition, words in his testimony and the deposition won't be used against him, that was wrong for the new prosecutor to use Bill Cosby's word to prosecute him. He was let out of jail because that was deemed to be inappropriate, and Supreme Court disagreed. So Bill Cosby is free, and he will not have to worry about returning back to jail.
Right.
Any thoughts?
No, I'll just say that you're absolutely
Okay.
right, and that's only an admission that he never should have went to jail anyway.
Right. Yeah, it was clear that the prosecutor that prosecuted him, because he ran on a platform that he was going to prosecute Bill Cosby, that there was some personal animus that he had against Bill Cosby. So Bill Cosby free. And also a story that we touched on last week, Officer Dave Valkenry, who was sentenced for the killing of Cameron Lamb. He just received 6 years. We talked about last week that the judge stated that he would be free on bail pending his appeal, but he was sentenced this week, and his sentence was 6 years for manslaughter. This is the white police officer that killed the brother who was backing his Jeep into his garage. He claimed that he had a gun, but his partner testified in court that he didn't see a gun. So he got 6 years, and of course he's appealing that particular decision. So, all right. Everybody knows what's going on in Ukraine. The Soviet Union had invaded the nation of Ukraine. But what a lot of people don't know is recently the United States engaged in bombing activity in the sovereign nation of Somalia, which is in Africa, for those who don't know. Michael, what happened in Somalia, and why did the United States military bomb areas of Somalia?
Well, some people's favorite president, Joe Biden, who they went to the mat for and voted for him, he has been consistently bombing Somalia and other places, but Somalia in particular. Now, he bombed Somalia the day before Russia invaded Ukraine. Now, allegedly, he used these predatory drones to target suspected Shabab terrorists. However, if you see the pictures, they were devastating. Now, he has, since he's been in office in 2021, he has bombed Somalia 5 times. He according to Common Dreams news, they're saying that Somalia has been bombed consistently by America over the last 15 years, which means over 4 years of Trump and 8 years of Obama, President Obama. So if it's a war crime for what Russia is doing to Ukraine, shouldn't it be viewed as a war crime for what America is doing to Somalia? To use predatory drones and to strike and wipe away blocks and killing civilians all at one time. And then all you say after the fact is you was going after some Shabab terrorists. That does not justify your actions. No country outside of America is allowed to come here and bomb anybody in all 50 states. That's what a sovereign government bears that right and responsibility of. You can't come to America, bomb East New York or Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, and then say, oh, I was going after some terrorists. That's what America is actually doing in Somalia. You can't keep killing Black people and then turn around and say, oh, well, there was some terrorists living at this location. You can't keep doing that. It's a crime, and that shows you that Joe Biden is no different than Donald Trump or any other white elected official. And in this particular case, truth be told, President Barack Hussein Obama, he bombed Somalia. So the facts are America military has no respect for Black countries, whether the Caribbean or whether it's Africa, and they will not hesitate to go in anytime they feel like it and kill Black people.
And I know one of the things the government officials claim is that with all of these bombings, that there were no civilian deaths. And they tried to claim, or they make the announcement that everyone who got killed was a terrorist or an associate of a terrorist. There's very little follow-up. Many people didn't even know that the United States government was bombing Somalia. At the same time, they were talking about the independent government of Ukraine being bombed and invaded by Russia. You know, the hypocrisy is preposterous. But you know, I have great concern because, you know, I believe that if the United States feels that they're assisting a sovereign nation, they should equip the sovereign nation to do what they deem is important to do in their nation. I don't think that the United States should take it upon themselves to conduct these bombs, as you stated. You know, United States have had terrorists on our shores in history past. I can only imagine if another sovereign country came in with drones and dropped some bombs on where they might have stayed to live, stating that they were targeting, terrorists. You know, that would never be allowed. But I think it's the epitome of hypocrisy. You don't hear no complaints from any of the NATO countries, the Western, the European countries. Everyone's concentrating on what's going on in Ukraine, and what goes on in Africa is never even mentioned, in many of these white headlines. So,
we haven't heard anything about it. We haven't heard anything about it. We have not heard from churches. We have not heard from any religious institutions. We have not even heard from all the major media outlets that are all over the country. everything they start in the middle and end with Ukraine, 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 and Russia. They're not mentioning that Africans are being targeted by predatory drones, and it's like it didn't happen. And they know that it's, and they're keenly aware that it's happening, but they say nothing about it.
Right, and not even Black selected officials. Black selected officials, and this goes back to my initial argument about our participation or our investment in electoral politics in America. These so-called Black Democrats, only time they'll cry, the only time you'll hear a whimper from them, if white folks whimper. Whatever white folks are concerned about, they're concerned about. Whatever white folks complain about, they're complaining about. But they don't have an interest, not even of the individuals in that district, but definitely not Africans throughout the diaspora. You look at people like Chuck Schumer. Let one thing, it doesn't even have to be a bullet. Let a criticism go in the direction of Israel, and he'll be the first one to raise his voice. Because that's the nation of his kith and kin presently. But Black officials, Black elected officials in America are absent. Like I said, their concerns are white concerns. Other than that, you won't hear a whimper from them. So thanks for bringing that up. We might give our viewing audience an update on that on a later program.
Right.
Another situation happened in Fort Lauderdale. Many of our viewing audience may have heard of this. A police chief, in an attempt to diversify his department, has been fired for that same reason. Now, the only way to diversify a department that has been not diversified, it's not reflective of the community that they serve, is you have to intentionally decide to promote particular people or hire particular people of a particular hue, whether it's Black or Latinos. That's the only way you're going to accomplish diversifying the department that, to that point has not been diversified. I don't know when diversity became a bad word in America, but in his attempt to diversify his police force, he was fired. And people claimed that there was like some kind of reverse racism. Michael, why don't you talk about that particular story?
Well, Police Chief Larry Scarrato was forced off within 6 months, forced out as police chief because he complained verbally about the lack of diversity, and he pledged that he would diversify the department. He went on several occasions, he took groups into the chief's conference room where they had a wall, and he would point to the wall, and the wall reflected the Florida Police Department's command staff, which were literally all white. And he said he would point to those pictures of his command staff and said they're too white and he's going to do something about it. So he went on to promote supervisors and captains that were Black. And the thing about it was, everybody he promoted, their record was impeccable. They had been experienced in every level of law enforcement, all the various divisions, and they had been outstanding at every juncture of their career. Consequently, they were so good that they could not point out one of them that shouldn't have been promoted to the rank of captain and other ranks. So they just used his words against him, that when he pointed to that wall, he said that wall and showed them the pictures of his command staff. He said they're too white and I'm going to do something about that. So even though they could not criticize his appointees, they said it was based on race, and they used his words against him because somehow diversity became a dirty word. And as a matter of fact, let me tell you what the city manager said. The city manager, whose name is Chris Lagerblum said that diversity is a plus. However, there are laws to govern the way it's done. Now, if you have an all-white command staff.
That's right. Go ahead, brother.
How do you get Black folks in there where if you go through the way it's been done, it's not gonna get done?
Facts.
It can't be done by the way it's the traditional route that it's been done, because they'll never get there. So
Right.
you gotta change things up. They are against change, so they use the words, him saying, too white, I gotta break this up, I gotta make a diverse department that reflects the communities we patrol. They use all these words against him. They cannot point to one Black captain he appointed and say that person didn't deserve it. They couldn't do it, but they could point to his words, because his words were to them an attack, to say that he's gonna diversify things, that command staff was too white. Those words were unconscionable to them. Therefore, they moved on him and got him taken out. They put in 4 complaints on him inside of 6 months, and the city controller removed him.
Now, all studies, Michael, and you can bear witness to that, have shown and determined that having a police force, or force that is reflective of the community, makes the force that much better. And their attempt to thwart what he was attempting to do, they just went to the weakest link. You know, he may have said some words, they didn't like the way he said it, but that's what they jumped on. But they know they were really jumping on the fact that they are against diversity. They believe in departments that are all white, especially at the top of the agency, and they're against diversity. You know, they want the department to remain as it's always been. And as opposed to these same people who had the nerve to point to him, finding objections with not having a diversified police force for so many years, for having an objection to that, they're going to object to his attempt to diversify the police department. And as you said, when he made those words, allegedly made those words, and people jumped on it, that's what they used to stop, what he was attempting to accomplish. What everyone in that town should want, a department that reflects the population, but of course they don't want it. And we've had those same issues in the New York City Police Department for years, same issues with the fire department for years. This individual should be commended for attempting to diversify his department, but instead, he was fired.
You know, he defended himself by saying every appointment he made, he said they deserved to be promoted. They just happened to be minority. It wasn't because they were minority. It's the fact that they deserved the position, and therefore he appointed them.
Right.
He's saying he didn't appoint them because they were minority. He did appointment because it's a meritorious appointment. They had put in the work, they deserved it, and they waited too long, and he made it happen. And so they just used his words against him.
Right. Okay. All right. Well, we'll see where that winds up. Another story. Fox News reporter Tucker Carlson, in regards to the Biden's appointee to the Supreme Court, Sister Kentanji Jackson, he made the outrageous demand that he wanted to check her SAT scores. Some of the same criticisms and accusations, of similar stupidity that was made with Obama. Some people wanted to see his birth certificate. Michael, Tucker Carlson, known to be a genius, he demanded to see a judge SAT scores. Your comments?
Well, certainly he's known for making outrageous statements, and he's a close confidant of Trump. Consequently, he said he wants to see her LSAT scores to prove that she's one of the nation's top legal minds. Your LSAT scores are not going to prove that you are a top legal mind. It's only going to prove that you can take a test. Now, the facts are, this is the same type of attack that Trump did on President Obama, wanting him to prove that he was born within the confines of the 50 states that make America. And not only was he accused of that, Donald Trump wanted to know how President Obama got into Columbia. So he wanted to see his scores at Columbia, and certainly he wanted to know from there, obviously, how did he matriculate to Harvard University Law School. So every step of the way you're questioned, and these questions are not reserved for white counterparts. Did Tucker Carlson ask any of the current 9 judges that's on the Supreme Court, did he want to see their LSAT scores? So every time a Black person advances towards a position, they move the goalposts. So this is all it is. You moving the goalposts. You're trying to find a way to find a chink in their armor. Consequently, he's using something that he would not use on a white person.
And basically what you're doing, and as we do many times in the program, is going full circle. When we talked about the Dred Scott decision and Judge Taney making a declaration that a Black man has no right that a white man is bound to respect. I mean, the goal of this individual to make such a demand, he knows it's an outrageous demand, but he has so little respect for an accomplished judge that he would publicly make some silly demand. And Trump was the same when he made the silly demand to Barack Obama. You better believe he never asked for the same criteria for other presidents. But this silly demand, he knows it's a silly demand, but he has no respect for our sister, who's an accomplished judge. Yeah, go ahead, brother.
You just reminded me of something, Noel.
Uh-huh.
Besides her being an appellate judge for about a year at least, this is a sister who she was at Harvard. She was magna cum laude at Harvard,
right,
undergrad, and she was cum laude at Harvard Law School. What more can you do? She's proven to be a scholar of extraordinary, just extraordinary.
Right.
So, undergrad, law school, the highest of honors.
Right.
How can he even fix his mouth to question her legal acumen?
Right. And then he's a reporter. So the facts that you just cited, he has access to that as well, Michael. Another story, Michael. The GOP voted against the Crown Act. Now, many of our viewers may not have heard of the Crown Act. Update our viewing audience about what they just voted against.
Well, it went to the halls of Congress, and at a vote of 235 to 188, so it didn't cross the threshold of 2/3, which you need. They were voting against the Crown Act, which bans discrimination of Black hairstyles. In other words, braids, locks, afros, things of that nature. It would it will disallow discrimination with respect to schools and the workplace, because there are certain places, whether it's school and certainly in the workplace, where they can raise questions as to your lifestyle and even in the armed services. So you have to, they put this bill in intentionally to disallow people discriminating against you if you were to come to work with locks, braids, what have you. And it's just, look, if you don't like a Black person's hairstyle, you don't like their skin color. You don't like the skin, you don't like the hair, You don't like the hips. You know, you want to be that. You want that Black body that Black women have. And now with the advent of a science where you can get work done on your posterior, on your breasts, on your lips, the very things that they always made a mockery of Black women for having stagiopedia, you know, the round behind, and having big lips. Their women now can get these treatments where they can get all that, so they don't make fun of it anymore, which tells me that you will have a problem with the hair and our skin only because you can't replicate that. So it's just more white supremacy, more hate designed to knock us down a peg or two and to make you, force you to wear white hairstyle. If you remember in the Black Panther, the Black woman that put on the wig, she said she felt like a clown. She felt disgusted in wearing a perm in her hair. And when she got busy, she threw that wig to the floor, never to be put on again. So we need more images like that, as opposed to trying to emulate that Scandinavian look, that white standard of beauty that they have.
And just, some may think that the Crown Act is a unnecessary act. I remember experiencing firsthand while a police officer in the 28th precinct, a white sergeant stating, vocalizing that his objection to a sister that wore dreads, you know, he said he felt threatened by a hairstyle. And it was so unbelievable for us at the time to hear that he would object and he would take offense to her wearing a dread hairstyle, you know. So all over the country, and this is in New York City, so-called progressive, so-called diverse, so-called multiculturalism, so-called melting pot New York City.
So you heard about it. You didn't hear it. That's something from 50 or 60 years ago, right?
No, sir. No, sir. This is something that I've heard personally. You know, a white sergeant articulating his objection to a hairstyle. So, I mean, you can imagine in states and cities and towns which don't have a large Black population like New York City, and if it can happen here, you know it happens elsewhere. So there's definitely, unfortunately, in the United States of America, I mean, this is how petty United States is as it relates to racial relations, where you have to have a law to protecting people for a particular hairstyle, which some people find objection to. I think that's preposterous. That you know, the GOP even voted against it, and I imagine some of them voted against it, saying it wasn't necessary. But these are some of the same individuals who I'm pretty sure would take objection to so many natural hairstyles. I think they would really enjoy, Michael, if we went back to the days when brothers wore perms, and you know, all the brothers, you know, put all that stuff in their hair and straighten it out. And I think they have more of a preference to that than seeing brothers and sisters wear their hair naturally.
Well, certainly, unfortunately, we have some prominent preachers who still wear their hair that way to this day. We have entertainers that still wear their hair like that to this day. But obviously, among our kith and kin, for the most part, we wear our hair the way we choose to. And unfortunately, you see too many Black women. I mean, there was a child, if you remember, we did a show years ago. There was a child, maybe 10, 11, maybe 12 the most, who refused to go to school because her mother wouldn't give her a perm. She didn't have the money to pay for a perm. So how embarrassed can a child be where a child hates the hair that's on her head and will not go to school, refuses to go to school because she can't reflect a white standard of beauty and have a perm in her hair? Now, if you chose whatever your hairstyle was, that's a whole different argument. But when it's imposed on you that you look, I mean, the sister, and pardon me for getting her name, the sister that would, the best gymnast that has dominated gymnastics like no other person ever has, they got on her about her hairstyle because she was wearing it naturally without a perm. I think she wears a perm now or slicks it back now, but the sister that for the last 6, 7, 8 years have dominated gymnastics, that sister, they got on her, calling her a monkey and a gorilla because of her hair. And certainly they held up a promotion class of graduates, women who were at the military academy, West Point, because they not only did they have that type of hair, but they were giving each other pounds and salutes, and the Army looked at it as like, wait, is that some Black Panther stuff? Wait, what is that? What are they doing? So that hairstyle, as you eloquently pointed out, it comes into the thinking because it's not their hairstyle, it's something we decided to do. And certainly white folks have a problem with anything we decide to do without their permission and their blessings.
Now, was that his name, Simone?
Yeah.
Biles?
Yeah.
Right.
Simone Biles, I think her name is.
Right, Simone Biles. And I remember the story. I don't know if you remember. There was a brother who was a wrestler, a very young man, who had his hair in dreads. He was forced with the threat of being kicked out of the tournament to cut his dreads before he was able to participate. And the brother really appreciated his hairstyle, and he was wrestling. He was a wrestler, no pun in terms, with either cutting his hair or competing. And unfortunately, he made the decision to cut his hair, but it really hurt him. So, when you think about individuals who think such an act, such as a Crown Act, is not necessary, I mean, as I stated and as we state, there's unfortunately, as it relates to African hair and African hairstyles, a lot of brushback against the goal of some of us who make the decision to wear our hair naturally. And some are offended, some will deny you employment, or perhaps, as in this particular example for this young man, he couldn't participate in a wrestling match, and they made him cut his hair in the gym before he was able to participate. So, that is definitely a need for that, now. Also, recently, it was announced, I think today, for years, there was anti-lynching laws that were on the books. Many in the Republican Party had fought against the passage of anti-lynching laws. And, some of our viewers would think, who would be against anti-lynching? Well, it was passed, I think, either today, fortunately, and that's something that we talked about, for a while. But do you have a comment on that before we close up, Mike? Well,
I'll just say, with respect to time, they do not want to condemn their forebears. So many of them in the past, and the not so far past, and recently has participated in all types of lynchings. So they definitely did not want to make that illegal. And if you remember, they used to have postcards where they would actually send it to relatives and send these postcards all over the country of the entire town out on a Sunday after church, pastor present, law enforcement present. You see the handcuff behind the Black man's back while he's being lynched. And law enforcement use handcuffs. So there was participants from all over right after a church service.
All right, closing comments.
Just want to say, Black man, Black woman, protect the Black child, accept your own, and be yourself.
All right, on behalf of Community Cop, we'd like to thank you, our viewing audience. We'd like to also thank our engineers, Veronica Kitt, Nat Woods, Sheila Berry, and Big D, for their participation and putting the program on. We'd like to thank you once again, viewing audience. Tell a foe, tell a friend about Community Cop. Those who missed the program, of course, can catch it on YouTube. You can also catch past programs as well. Forward ever, backwards never. Little more, I love you. Kitty Cat, I love you.
Grenada, Maurice
yes.
Bishop. All
Right,
right.
right. And old Hawk, we look forward to you coming back.
Yes, sir.
Don't be surprised. You might see Hawk next week. Family,
Nice.
peace.